Altiovian Creation Myth, Part 3, The First Men of Altiove. Of all the Purthians' creations, the wisest and most cunning of all was that of the golden-haired fox. When Altiove was still in its youthful days, full of life of many kinds, lush and verdant with cool green forests, clear flowing streams, and crisp white mountain peaks, all was good in the paradise which the Meai had created. But there was but one part of the land that was sacred, and all but the Meai's chosen few were permitted to reside within. This was the golden lands of the foxes, where the wise old foxes lived as immortal beings, under the protection of the ancient Purthian trees, which flourished there in golden hues of glittering leaves. The golden forests granted the foxes their immortality, and turned their original grey coats to that of shimmering gold. Only the foxes were permitted this gift, for only the foxes were wise enough to be trusted with such a gift. Other creatures envied the foxes, but knew not to dare oppose the will of the Meai. Purthia, the oldest and wisest of all the golden-haired foxes, took pity on the lesser beings, which also inhabited the world of Altiove, and with his sage advice and clear, rational mind, he quickly showed that the foxes were not creatures to be feared or envied, but were joyful, benevolent spirits of the forest, who would watch over and protect all those who got in trouble or lost within any of the forests of Altiove. The other creatures soon came to love them as much as the foxes loved all lost souls that wandered into their dear golden forest. Forevermore in the traditions of Altiove, we must revere and show our thanks to the wise foxes of the lost land, and so since those ancient days the foxes have always been a revered and sacred animal to the people of Altiove. But in those early days of the land, this paradise within paradise was soon to be tarnished forever and bent by the will of the Agroro. Forever jealous of his brother's power to create, the Agroro loathed the golden lands of the foxes and wished to make it a black and evil place. Under the land where no sunlight ever penetrated, his minions, the Cronidians, devised a new and terrible form of life that would crush the world above and rain devastation on all the creatures of the land. These were the giants. As towering as mountains and with hearts as shallow as footsteps, they devastated the land with no remorse. Even the Cronidians felt the ground around them tremble and collapse with the might of the giants. They were unstoppable and untamable. They were so terrible that both the good creatures of the Purthian and the wicked monsters of the Agroro hated them and wanted to be rid of them. And so for the first time since the time of the rebirth, the two brothers of the Meai came together to devise a way to rid themselves of the terrible giants. The wise foxes of the devastated golden lands were in attendance, as they had suffered the greatest loss and were now just 5 living bodies in total, destined for extinction. It was they that suggested to the Purthian and the Agroro that a new creature should be born, one that was as wise as the Purthian fox, but as tough and ruthless as an Agroro Cronidian. Such a creature would be both smart and strong, and able to defeat the giants with ease. And so the Purthian and the Agroro worked together, combining their powers as a mother and father both alike, to birth the first of these new creatures. The Purthian gave these new creatures the golden hair of the fox and made them wise and benevolent. The Agroro gave them strength and a powerful will that was unmatched by any other creature. But in secret he endowed these new creatures with greed and paranoia. This he did so he could manipulate the creatures to his own ends. It was all too late when the Dirthion discovered his evil ploy, years later, when the creatures began to fight and fear each other. From this pouring of power from both the Dirthion and the Agroro came the new-born creatures, which we now call man. At first, there were 3 men, all tall, strong, and powerful, but as yet were not true men like their descendants, and could not create offspring as the animals could. There was Meaiatta the wise, Purthia the strong, and Altiovian the imaginative. Together the 3 came up with a plan to defeat the giants. Altiovian used his inventiveness to devise all kinds of traps and ploys to trick the giants. Meaiatta used his keen eyes to observe the world around them, and with his wisdom saw a way to use Altiovian's inventive ideas against the giants. Purthia, the strongest of men, was powerful enough to build the traps and set them where Meaiatta had told him would be the most strategic place to set them. In this way, the 3 first men planned, set their traps, and were successful in defeating most of the giants, until only a few remained. The other giants ran in fear of these new and terrible creatures, forged from both the Dirthion and the Agroro. Some hid under the land, and some became mountains, while others dove into the sea and became giant sea monsters. When their task was done, the first men now found themselves with an even greater task. The once glorious land of Altiove was in ruins, and now that the giants were gone, the Agroro sent his monsters over the land to dominate and rule over the remaining creatures. It was the wise old golden fox Purthia who had first suggested to the Meai to create man, who came to the 3 heroes now. He was sad that his golden forest was now lost forever, corrupted beyond redemption by the Agroro's evil minions. He pleaded with the 3 first men to help him rebuild the rest of the land and make it as it once was. But he already knew that once great land was gone forever, for with his ancient wise eyes he saw evil lust in Purthia's eyes. Purthia answered the wise old fox and asked why they should work tirelessly to rebuild a bygone world which they had had no part in. Purthia was now tainted by the Agroro's gift of greed, and asked the wise old fox why they should not now be the leaders of this new world. The other 2 men were stunned by their companion's sudden change of heart, and began to shun him as though he were nothing but a foul creature of the Agroro. Purthia was strong and could have defeated both Meaiatta and Altiovian in combat, but not easily. For fear of a hard struggle, and corrupted by the Agroro's paranoia, he fled and hid under the land, becoming something halfway between a man and a monster. As for Meaiatta and Altiovian, they elected to listen to the wise words of Purthia, and agreed to help him in rebuilding the world. The fox granted him one more gift to help them in their quest to rebuild the world. To Meaiatta he gave him more strength, and a shaft which gives life rather than takes life. Meaiatta then grew a great beard, and became a fully formed man, whereas Altiovian lost some of his strength, but was made up for in beauty. His hair grew out in long flowing locks of gold, and his face became soft and feminine. His bosom blossomed outward, and she was given the gift of creating new life within her womb. Together with Meaiatta, she mothered the first generation of man, born from the first men. And so Purthia, the first and last of the great golden foxes, departed the world and left it in the care of man, so that all the generations of man thereafter may help in the rebuilding of the lost world. Worship the Meai, so that with the power of worship the Meai may exist once again to aid in the birth of the new world, as was told by the wise old foxes long before men ever walked the lands. Only through the worship of man can the Meai come to exist one day, and choose to either let man live forever in a golden land, or rebirth the world to start it once more as it was before. And that is the legend of the Meai, Altiove's creation story. Thank you very much for listening, and farewell.